Right, so we're going to move on to part 3. Now, Josh, you can take a break here because this is what Mo's been waiting for. And I'm big enough and mature enough to, admit when I was wrong, or at least not considered in my views on this. And Mo, you were right all along because part 3 is the shutdown corner, the defensive fullback, locked down, a corner of the pitch just owned defensively. And surprise, surprise, your boy Aaron Wan-Bissaka is the subject of this one. Now, his numbers are so fantastic that we've not actually got someone to put up in comparison to him. So this is just going to be a few minutes of Mo eulogising about Wan-Bissaka. So I'm going to throw some of the numbers at you in terms of what he's done this based on this 18 to 19 bracket. He is top in Europe for tackles made, 384. He's top for interceptions, 241, at an average of just under 2 per 90 minutes. And he's top of the shop for duels won, 747. Mo, I'm going to throw the floor over. Go for it.
Look, let's bring it back to the start. Who is the paradigm of the defensive fullback? Well, I think one of them is Gary Neville. One of them are recent ones. Obviously, you can go back to the Brazilian teams, and originally fullbacks were the last line defense and so on and so forth. But modern era, Gary Neville was a great example, right? He was a defender. Ferguson once famously said if he was an inch taller, he'd be the best centre back in Britain, right? He was a phenomenal defender, really rugged defensive fullback. He could attack, he could get forward and overlap occasionally, but he wasn't known for these lung-busting runs. He just left that. He always said, he left that generally to Beckham or Kanchelskis or latterly Cristiano Ronaldo. He would just stay back there and defend his flank, and he would do a really good job. You couldn't get past him, whether by fair or foul, just ask Arsenal, he would stop you. And it's funny because I think the two best examples of the shutdown corner, the modern shutdown corner, are in Manchester, with Kyle Walker and Aaron Wan-Bissaka. Now, we mentioned Walker earlier. I mentioned part of the reason why Cancelo is playing left back, despite being a brilliant right back, is because Walker's playing right back. And Walker can't play left back, and Cancelo can play left back. So that's the difference. Walker is phenomenal. At Spurs under Pochettino, he was a freight train. He was just up and down, and he was this archetypal. Okay, Walker's great. Walker and Rose. Remember they had those two fullbacks, phenomenal. Danny Rose and Kyle Walker. But now, at City, he's become different. He's been used differently by Pep. He's basically a shutdown. He's a defensive player. They like I said, he starts in the half space in midfield essentially when City have the ball, and he doesn't really get involved too much in attack. Occasionally he'll get forward and get involved. Mostly he stays back, and his job is to protect against transitions because he's got ridiculous pace and he's got great defensive instincts when Pep is in his ear yapping at him all the time, and he gets back and he covers. He does a really, really good job helping his team out. And then another good example is Benjamin Pavard over in Bayern Munich, who was a centre-back originally, moved to full-back just because they were like, why not? And he won the World Cup there, so Bayern have kept playing him there as well because Bayern don't really have a right-back because they moved Kimmich into midfield. And just before we get to my victory parade, I want to mention other two guys in London. Cesar Azpilicueta is a fantastic defensive right-back for years. Has been obviously came through. He was originally another one. He was originally a freight train. Then when he went to Chelsea, Jose Mourinho, used him as a defensive left back, and everyone was thinking, "Huh, what are you doing?" And he was really good at it. And then he moved to the right, played right centre back, played right wing back, right back, straight up. Whatever he plays, he does it defensively, and he's really, really good. And for a guy who isn't exactly massively tall, he's won 253 aerial duels. Since the start of 2018-19, only two right backs have more than that. That's really impressive for a short guy. Well, short guy, average height guy. And the other one that there's not going to be much numbers on because he's very new, Takahiro Tomiyasu over at Arsenal. Very, very good right back. Very solid defensive right back. And you can see the difference in Arsenal's play when he's there versus when he's not. And I'll tell you something, if he was there against Liverpool in that recent game, that game ends 0-0. Those two goals, Liverpool goals, came because Tomiyasu wasn't there to defend that flank, and Liverpool picked on that. Anyway, Wan-Bissaka. Look, if you know Wan-Bissaka, if you watched him play, you know he's ridiculous, right? He's been completely utterly failed by the coaching of Man United. He was being undercoached for years. His confidence got absolutely wrecked. Ralph Rangnick came in. Rangnick doesn't play. He plays symmetrical fullback. He doesn't play asymmetric fullback. So the right back has to be able to attack and really be confident on the ball and be able to drive forward. Wan-Bissaka is not a great attacker. He's an average attacker, maybe even below average. His passing is really spotty and shoddy. His crossing is hit and miss. He's a great dribbler. He's a very good dribbler, but that's about it. He doesn't take up good attacking positions. He's not great at attacking, right? But that doesn't matter because he's not an attacker. He's a shutdown corner. He is the most ridiculous one-on-one defender I think I've ever seen. Like he could be an Italian centre back. That's how good he is at one-on-one defending. Like he's just utterly absurd. And this is a guy who, if you've watched him play, he's taken on Mbappe and Neymar in the same game and shut them both down. Right, made them both. He ran them both off that flank. Like they both tried to run at him, and he couldn't get past him, and they ran off the flank. And of course, hilariously, famously, Man United at Old Trafford, Neymar ran off the left flank to get away from Mbappe, from Wan-Bissaka, and then just dished up Harry Maguire a couple of times to give PSG a very big win in Champions League, if you recall that a couple of years ago. But Wan-Bissaka, his like you said, the numbers are there. Most tackles, most interceptions. His clearances is really good, 278 as well. His true tackle success rate, which is the amount of times he wins the ball, like it's his true tackle success rate is by far like the highest. It's 77.8%. Let me see, 78.5% true tackle success rate, which is highest among all fullbacks. I think only a few other players have higher. None of them are fullbacks. He's genuinely special as a defensive player, and he's been utterly failed by Man United and their coaching. And the numbers back it up, as you say, which is great. Hurrah! I'm not interested in being smug because honestly, I'm just sad that he's been failed.
No,
it's true.
Yep.
Because I've been saying for years, he's someone who is a genuinely special, unique skill set, right? And he's not being protected, not being put into the system. Look at Trent. Trent could very easily have bombed out of anyway. If he'd been at a different club, or even if he'd been at a Liverpool prior to Klopp, he could have very easily bombed out because he's like, oh, this guy's no fullback. He can't defend at all. He's rubbish. Oh, look, he's not even a midfielder either. He's not really very. You could easily see how someone with a unique skill set like Trent could be neglected just enough that it knocks his confidence, and then doesn't become rubbish, but it's not the same, right? Wan-Bissaka, when he came to United at first, was just utterly unreal. And he's had his confidence slowly chipped away by everyone saying, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't attack, you can't. And then obviously he under Solskjaer, this start of the season, he was one of the people who had really suffered, had a really bad start of the season. And his confidence is just shot now. And obviously Rangnick doesn't like defensive fullbacks. He needs asymmetric fullbacks. So he's got no chance. But you look at what Pep does with Walker, what Arteta does with Tomiyasu. You look at these guys and you think, why can't you do that with even to an extent what Real Madrid did with Danny Carvajal for years before Carvajal's legs went with injury. He was he could attack, but he was also a phenomenal, very dogged, rugged defender. Gave Madrid's defense loads of personality. And you think, well, why couldn't Wan-Bissaka do that for Man United? Because Man United are coached by. Or Man United run like a circus, basically. And they've failed basically every player that's walked through the doors since Sir Alex Ferguson left in 2013. But Wan-Bissaka is one of the most egregious examples of them failing a player, in that they had this singularly unique, brilliant talent that could have been, generation defining in a different way to Trent, right? Trent is obviously, the starry-eyed attacking genius, poster boy. Wan-Bissaka could have been the one that says, yeah, you know what, you can also be a very good defender and be a fullback. You can also be a classic defender, and they failed him. And as a result, hopefully a smart club picks him up in the summer and brings him back to his full glory, because he's phenomenal.
Before we go on to the last section, Josh, I just want to ask you a bit again about Wan-Bissaka and this idea of a shutdown defender, because strangely, he's also a victim of perception, because Trent is a victim of perception in the sense of this narrative that he can't defend, he's a dreadful defender, he gets caught out all the time. Whereas you've got Wan-Bissaka, that the numbers are here right in front of your face to suggest what an excellent one-on-one defender he is. He defends space very well, he defends people trying to get past him very well, he's very aggressive and very maybe basic in his defending, but he defends the situation. There is clearly still room for a fullback like that in 2022, but there is this weird idea that no fullback is good enough for this dream fullback that's been created. Trent's too attacking, Wan-Bissaka's too defensive. What do people want?
Well, it's difficult, and I think it depends a lot on the club. I think it depends a lot on the coach. I think one of the reasons behind Wan-Bissaka's struggles is he's gone to a club that obviously they're very dysfunctional and a little bit all over the place, but in addition to that, they have aspirations to play football like Liverpool or to play football like Manchester City. And I think it's difficult with these shutdown fullbacks to have a team of 11 players and one of them is kind of a bit of a negative on the ball. Like if you think of the Europa League final, I think it was the final a few years ago, Manchester United against Villarreal. Villarreal's whole game plan was basically to funnel the ball towards Wan-Bissaka because he wasn't going to hurt them. And I think when you're playing in such an offensive way, it really helps when you're the favourites, which Manchester United are probably going to be in a large majority of games, to have players across the board all over the pitch who can play the last pass. And I think Wan-Bissaka is not really that. I don't think he's ever really going to be that either. I think his dribbling is certainly decent, but other than that, I think offensively he does have quite a limited skill set. So I think if he's going to play for a top club that are going to win the biggest honours, I think it would have to be for like an Atletico Madrid or a team like that, as opposed to a team that are going to dominate possession, a team that are going to play really offensive football, high pressing and generating wave after wave of attack and things like that. So it just depends. But I do think that when it comes to what you're saying there in terms of unrealistic expectations almost, I do agree with you. I think it's really difficult now to tick every box. Very few players across the board tick every box. One player who I think you could argue does, albeit he's not a fullback, is Van Dijk. I think Van Dijk does kind of everything you need from a typical modern centre back, and as a result of that, he received very good publicity. So maybe that's proof that when a player does kind of achieve that in his game, he does get praise for it, and people do flag his minor mistakes whenever they materialise, but generally he is praised. So I think if Trent's defensive game was maybe not even Wan-Bissaka's level, if it was the level of maybe Reece James, I think Trent would probably see a lot less criticism going his way for his defensive game. But
he'd still get criticised because he's that good at attacking. There's nothing else you can do but criticise him. It's that thing. He actually is not a bad defender, really, but because his attacking is so good, people they lack the scope and a capacity of imagination to explain his attacking, so they just say, well, he can't defend. It's just easier to do that. With regards to Wan-Bissaka, I think he could play for a top team. A top team wanting to dominate the ball. You have to just use it differently. So, for example, Man United, right? They have two centre-backs who are really good on the ball. Harry Maguire and, good on the ball. Let's not say really. Harry Maguire and Victor Lindelof, right? Lindelof is really good on the ball sometimes. Maguire can carry it quite nicely. I mean, it's okay sometimes, but I mean, obviously he's had his own problems this season defensively. But the point was always, I looked at Man United play, and I told them they didn't get Varane till this summer, remember? So they had these two centre-backs who are comfortable on the ball. And it was like, and you've got Wan-Bissaka. So why are you sending, who isn't comfortable? So why are you sending Wan-Bissaka forward in attacking phases? Like, it's just a very sort of, it requires a sort of maybe a slightly more imaginative mind to think about it. Like, oh, okay, so I've got this guy who can't really attack, but he's a very good defender. And I've got these defenders who are very good attackers. Why don't, in possession, I send Victor Lindelof forward? And Wan-Bissaka can just stay back and defend transition, which he's great at doing anyway. It's just a little tweak. So, for example, like Pep Guardiola, where do I use Kyle Walker? Well, I could just send him forward like a normal fullback. Or, because he's so good defensively and not that great offensively, I could just have him stay back here and occasionally only make the overlapping run to surprise opponents and instead just stay there and help defend transition. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it requires a bit of imagination about how to use a player. So, Klopp is like, well, I've got this amazing guy, Trent Alexander-Arnold, but he leaves gaps behind him when he attacks. What can I do? Well, I could tell him to stay back and defend, or I could just have one of my hard-working midfielders, Jordan Henderson, James Milner, when he goes forward, just tuck him behind him. And then it's not a problem because, oh, look, there's someone in that space defending it. Now, Liverpool and Man City are two of the best teams in the world, and they've both found a way to use unorthodox fullbacks. Right, and not suffer for them, and
progress with it more than just not suffer with it. They've actually managed to progress with it.
Yeah, and I get it though. Wan-Bissaka is an offensive black hole almost, right? He's a weak point offensively, but the fact that what blew my mind all is at United was that they kept trying to make trying to make fetch happen. They kept trying to make him happen. It's like, no, he's not going to be a good attacker. Maximize what he's good at, minimize what he's bad at. And the thing is, especially if you have centre backs who are good on the ball, that's what's so perplexing. If you have centre backs that aren't good on the ball, I could almost understand, like, you have to force Wan-Bissaka, please, Aaron, try and figure it out because no one else can do it. But when you have Lindelof and Maguire who are so comfortable driving forward with the ball, use one of them, let them do it. Have Wan-Bissaka tuck in and cover for them. It requires a little bit of imagination and but United just don't have any imagination, except how to print more money, I guess.
Right, so the final section of the podcast today is a little bit more light-hearted. There is obviously numbers backing it up. We've gone for what I've labelled as the accidental target man, or the accidental centre-forward fullback. And the best example, Josh, that we've pulled up for this, particularly based on Premier League numbers, is Tottenham's Matt Doherty. Obviously, coming from Wolves, he was very successful under Nuno Santo. He was then managed by Nuno Santo at Spurs. Didn't really work with Jose Mourinho, but under Antonio Conte, things are starting to change for him. So just throwing it back to the metrics again from 18-19 up to the present day, he is the second highest defender in the Premier League for touches in the opposition box. 248, he averages just under 3 per 90 minutes. Aerial duels won, top of the shop in the whole of Europe, which is massively impressive, 342, and he's top in the Premier League based across 90 minutes at 3.85. And then when we look at this oddity of, oh my God, I'm a right back, I'm in front of goal, I'll get a shot off and I might get a goal. Matt Doherty's right up there with Trent. He's actually second in the Premier League, only to Trent, with 40 shots on target based on that metric. This is an odd hybrid of all these roles that we've been talking about, but Matt Doherty's actually the best at it.
Yeah, I think he's a very interesting player. I liked him during his time at Wolves. Actually, I think he's a very, very, very specialist player when it comes to this kind of role. Another few that come to mind as well for me was he's a left back, but Marcos Alonso ticks the box of a tall fullback / wing back, if you like, who you can use in different ways. A while back as well, Dan Burn played as a left back for Brighton. He's obviously, one of the tallest players in the league, but he's good on the ball, and you can use him in certain different ways. So I do think it's quite a rare profile to come across, but I think it's interesting. And when Conte first came in, actually, I did think it was probably a matter of time before Matt Doherty started to play more often, simply because in terms of what Conte wants from his wing backs, I think Doherty ticks those boxes, even though he's not blessed with the most quality. Emerson Royale's probably a better player overall, but in terms of what Conte requires for a certain role, I think Doherty was quite well suited, and I think you can say the same on the opposite flank for Sessegnon. So I think a recurring theme maybe of this podcast really has been, different systems and different players being suited to different scenarios, basically, and being adjusting tactics around that. And I think if you've got a player like this, it's a really interesting profile to have, but it's one that you can use, and I think Conte's proven that.
And Mo, this again comes back to this idea of there's more than one way to break through an opposition defence. And Doherty, in the way that he plays, particularly at Wolves, we're now starting to see a bit of that at Spurs. This idea that the big switch from Dyer or Romero or Bentancur, Doherty as a presence forces the opposition left back or left wing back to go back, engage in an aerial duel, which based on the numbers, Doherty will win. That then brings a new phase of play into action, whether it's Kulusevski or Kane. And it is a different way of doing things. There's maybe a little bit of negative connotation that it's a bit old school and it's a bit meat and spuds, but actually it's based on numbers that if you've got a player that is capable at doing these things, then maximise it. He's not bending the rules, it's not dark arts or anything like that. He's just very, very effective in a completely different way than the other names we've mentioned.
Yeah, it's both finding a strength in your team and a weakness in opponents. Fullbacks generally aren't great in the air because they're fullbacks. They don't usually have to do that. Centre-backs usually defend in the air. And most fullbacks aren't tall either. They're quite short. So, you have a guy who bombs forward and is great in the air. Launch balls up to him, and he can win them against fullbacks. Like you say, it's almost like someone's drawn it up on a spreadsheet. Do you know what I mean? Like it doesn't feel like an old school kind of vibe, even though it is an old school style of knock it long and win it header with the big man. It feels like someone said, "Oh, you know what? We've noticed that a lot of fullbacks lose or only win X% of aerial duels, and they're all usually under like 6 foot tall. Doherty is like, what is he? 6 foot, 6'1", and he's great in the air. Why don't we just start bombing him forward and chucking long balls up to him? I mean, it might have been that. It might just have been a coincidence. I don't know, but it feels like a smart sort of way. Like you said, there's so many ways you can be a fullback, being being a very good elite attacking fullback, being a very dangerous attacking fullback. And, Doherty has found a way to do it himself, a unique way, unique to him. Well, not unique to him, but he's one of the best at it. maybe in the future again you'll see other tall fullbacks who are very good in the air. Maybe you have a centre back who, for whatever reason, maybe he's a bit extra quick or something. Maybe he gets pushed out to right back for whatever reason. He could start doing that. He could start winning aerial duels. It's a thing you can do. If you find a way to maximize a player you've got, maximize some talent you have, and minimize or capitalize on the strength and weakness of the opponent, why wouldn't you do it? You know what I mean? So it makes sense that Conte is now starting to do that. Like just before, like when he had Candreva at wing back at Inter, he would just give it to Candreva, and Candreva would just spam crosses into the box because Candreva was an amazing crosser of the ball. All right. And then when he had Hakimi wasn't spamming crosses. Hakimi was running into the box and getting into the box. Hakimi, by the way, could be a good target man. He's quite tall. If you start lobbing crosses up to him, he might be able to start winning them as well. So there could be some there. Doherty could have a challenger for his crown, maybe, if Hakimi feels like it.
Yeah, well, we'd have to create 2 double sections. We can't have anyone winning 2 sections. Apologies to Matt Doherty. We took an inch off you before. Matt Doherty is 6'2", so apologies about that. No one likes to be called shorter than they actually are.